are these people?
Hey, there we go.
I
So,
would definitely zoom that in.
yeah, we're gonna have to zoom that in. And this is let me tell you, we did a story on Moon of Alabama. Alabama. Um, I don't know, about 3 weeks ago. And we talked about their
Yeah.
OPSEC stuff that they had called and how they were just spot on with their coverage. And that has gotten so many different so many views on the clip, especially like wow. I was like, we need to do more Moon of Alabama stuff because they got fire, they got great analysis, and people seem to like it. So, by all means, good stuff, Moon of Alabama, and here we are again. So, Russia has launched phase 2 of its operation in Ukraine, and this was an
Mm.
open thread number 51. And some of the weapons delivered to Ukraine will be used against us. This was on April 20th. So this is on 420. And I think even Richard Medhurst may have done an article about this, but that the U.S. and its prosecutors in Europe are moving an enormous amount of weapons into Ukraine, but no one has an idea where those weapons will end up. It is likely that many of those will proliferate outside of the Ukraine, and some of those weapons will inevitably hit those who will now deliver them. I'm laughing, but
Yeah.
there's no laughing matter. It's just really serious, and because we have no control over what these where these things are going, and we're just handing them out to Nazis willy nilly. Hey, thanks, Joe. In a review of the U.S. war on Syria, Aaron Mate details. Aaron Mate details how the Obama Biden team empowered terrorist networks in Syria, right, which is based on declassified documents, news reports, and scattered admissions of U.S. officials. This overlooked history of how the Obama Biden team's effort to oust the Assad regime in concert with allies including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey details a series of discrete decisions that ultimately led the U.S. to empower terrorist networks bent on its destruction. And I'm guessing they're talking about like Al Qaeda and Al Nusra, um,
Yeah.
and some of the rebels in Syria. The U.S. pushed an enormous amount of weapons into Syria. Those weapons did not end up with the moderate rebels the U.S. propaganda had elevated, but in the hands of the most ideologically committed and most brutal actors on the ground. That's great. So again, you've even got just 1 month after Benghazi, New York Times reported that hardline Islamic jihadists, including groups with ties or affiliations to Al Qaeda, have received the lion's share of the arms. So that was shipped to Syria. That's great. Thanks, guys. So, in a
Yeah.
repeat of that strategy, the U.S. is currently pushing an enormous amount of weapons as well as mercenaries into Ukraine. The problem is, again, that it's not going to end up in their hands. The bigger stuff it delivers is
No.
not much of a concern, but the huge amount of small arms and small ammo, the anti tank weapons,
Right.
and the handheld anti air systems are of
The
serious long
javelins,
term
all that
danger.
shit. Yep.
These fit into a
Yep.
car trunk. They could easily be smuggled across borders. Okay.
Yep.
Previously explained, right wing ideology that is nurtured in Ukraine will become a danger primarily to European countries, but also beyond. And here we go. Whitney Webb writes CIA is creating the new Al Qaeda, this time as a white supremacist right wing militia. And Whitney Webb is as good as they come. Love her. Shout out to Whitney. Okay. The fact that Moon of Alabama is citing and using Whitney's research in their work tells me a lot. And it's a lot why probably it's getting the views that it's getting and why they're accurate with their analysis. But a part of these mercenaries are currently getting recruited by Western security companies, quote unquote security, right? These are private, these are the Eric Prince run Blackwater Exo private military
Right.
contractors that do the same exact thing, but charge us 3 times as much for
Yep.
ex-military with no with not
Yep.
as with no oversight from Congress either. By the way, um,
Yeah.
these militia will all use the small weapons NATO countries that NATO countries are now delivering to Ukraine or to attack Russian troops and their supporters. And of course, there's a lot of serious backlashes in Poland and Romania, where these troops get deployed. In the long run, it'll lead to right wing terror coming back to these countries who are now supporting these forces. And again, there's a lot of right wing extremism right now going on in Poland. I know there's like 10% of their, I think, stuff is neo Nazi. It's like kind of scary. Um, Okay, hashtag win Bruce. Okay, together with the economic devastation that U.S. and European sanctions on Russia are causing on their own economies, this will end in regime changes in several European countries. That's right. The U.S. is, of course, again protecting itself from as much as it can at the cost of others. And again, if Poland gets destabilized, that's bad for us. But we're fighting. This is the proxy war, and these are the sacrifices that our government, unfortunately, is willing to make. Is to
Yeah.
have the citizens get so angry at their leaders that they sided with us and backed this action that they end up throwing out their government and putting in a hardline right wing government that's aligned with the Nazis in Ukraine, which is just what? Wow. Um, if there's a lesson to be learned from Syria, it's that the most ideologically committed and most brutal people on the ground will not only proliferate their ideology into will not only proliferate them into other countries, they're also the groups which inevitably end up holding the most dangerous weapons. They'll give some to those groups in other countries, which will have the same ideology. Fascist groups in Ukraine are
Yeah.
not a Russian propaganda invention or just nationalist. Again, citing back 2018, even the NATO lobbyists at the Atlantic Council, and we know all about the Atlantic Council, called them a dangerous threat. All right, and this again is the Atlantic Council's assessment from 2018. Over the last 8 years in those groups, Ukraine have had lots of contacts with similar groups in other countries. They've invited foreigners to fight with them on the front line with the Donbass republics. These are potential buyers for the weapons that are now being delivered to Ukraine. So the U.S. has no idea who ends up with the tens of thousands of weapons it is now providing. And again, this says the U.S. has few ways to track the substantial supply of anti-tank, anti-aircraft, and other weaponry is sent across the border into Ukraine. Sources tell CNN, a blind spot that's due in large part to a lack of U.S. boots on the ground in country. See what they're trying to do? Oh, well, we can't track the weapons, so we have to send soldiers in there to track the weapons? Because that's what U.S. soldiers are good at doing.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
so
it's and that's just going to be an excuse to put U.S. troops in there anyway. Like,
yep.
you know.
Well, they're already in
So
Poland, and Roland. What's his name's
right.
with him? But Malcolm Nance, or
Oh yeah.
or as Daryl or Ian brother calls him, Rambro. Almost, I fell over when he said
Rambro.
that shit. Rambro, outstanding. Okay,
Uh,
I couldn't tell you where they are in Ukraine, or whether Ukrainian officials are using them at this point. That's really good to know. Okay, they're not telling us every round of ammunition they're firing and at whom and when. They may never know exactly to what degree they've been using the switchblades. Of course not.
yeah.
But trucks loaded with pallets of arms provided by the DoD are picked up by Ukrainian armed forces, primarily in Poland, and then driven across the border. And then it's up to the Ukrainians to determine where they go and how they're allocated inside their country. And they said one cannot trust Ukrainian officials who claim that these weapons will only be used for good purposes. Yeah, we can see how good they are when they get tied to when they've been saran wrapping people to telephone poles with their asses hanging out.
Painting them green. Yep. Yep.
It's a war. Everything they do and say publicly is designed to help them win the war. Every public statement is an information operation. Every interview, every Zelensky appearance broadcast is an information operation, said another source familiar with Western intelligence. Yeah,
Yep.
that's exactly it. It is an information war. So again, Zelensky constantly demands more weapons, and no one has an idea where they'll end up. How will he himself set aside to later sell, and who will buy those? Or how many? Well, yeah, I mean, look, because his wealth has increased tremendously. So for sure, yeah, javelins have come home to roost. Will be a headline. Oh goodness, I hope not. Um, the experience from the war on Syria tells us the weapons that fell off a truck in Ukraine will eventually end up in the most ideologically committed, most brutal people. In Ukraine, those are the fascists. Some international criminals gangs may want to eliminate rivals who might also be interested. How long will it take until a switchblade suicide drone will drop on a police car in Poland? How long until an anti-tank weapon will be used in a gang fight in Paris? How long until Stinger anti-tank, anti-air missile will down a civil airplane in Rome? 1, 3, 5 years?
Yep.
It's now a danger we're all going to be living with. Thanks, Joe. Keep arming the fucking Nazis and keep sending weapons willy-nilly across the border and handing it to these guys with no idea of where it's going to go or how it's going to be distributed. Great work, everybody. Woohoo! USA, USA.